In June 1991, 6 bouncers from Top Guard Security were brutally stabbed and slashed by a vicious gang, described as a frenzied pack of hyenas, terrorizing clubbers in a savage mob attack. But who was behind this bloodbath, and why did they target the London door firm that had secured the Hacienda contract? Welcome to Crime Pulse. If you're new here, hit subscribe and join our growing community digging into the UK's most dangerous criminal underworlds. Like, share, and turn on notifications so you never miss a case. In 1991, Manchester's legendary Hacienda nightclub was back in action, having reopened just a month earlier after a forced closure due to escalating violence. The club, born in 1982 when Factory Records' Tony Wilson and the managers of iconic Manchester bands Joy Division and New Order turned an old red brick warehouse into a multi-floor nightlife hotspot, was no stranger to big names. It hosted rock legends like the Smiths, the Stone Roses, and Oasis, but it was the explosive rave culture that made it a cultural and financial juggernaut. The spark came in 1986 when New Order, fed up with local gang issues, headed to Ibiza to record an album. There, they stumbled on a vibrant club scene fueled by ecstasy, says Peter Hook, the band's bassist. We saw the magic, invited people to experience it, and brought that energy back to Manchester. It started small, one weekly Ibiza-inspired night with palm trees, ice pops, and pounding Chicago house and Detroit techno beats, all amplified by ecstasy's rise. The vibe caught fire, pulling in 100,000 ravers, from local university students to partygoers across the north. Picture 10 or 12 people climbing onto a stage built for 100, chanting together, arms outstretched, all moving in perfect sync to the music, Hook recalls. The Hacienda wasn't just a club, it became the beating heart of a cultural revolution. The Hacienda's booming club scene became a goldmine as ecstasy took over, says Peter Hook. Middle-class kids were slinging pills at £30 a pop, raking in cash hand over fist. Gangsters quickly caught on to the lucrative drug trade. From the first Ibiza-inspired night in 1988 to the club's temporary closure in early 1991, rival gangs unleashed waves of violence, battling to dominate the drug market. A notorious gangster, Anthony Johnson, also known as White Tony, and his Cheetham Hill crew escalated tensions by threatening door staff with guns after being denied entry. Fed up with the chaos, the Hacienda's management hit pause to overhaul their security approach and tackled a gang menace head-on. White Tony ran with the Cheetham Hill Gang, a ruthless outfit known for armed robberies and drug trafficking. Unlike the Moss Side gangs they clashed with, the Cheetham Hillbillies operated with a slick, organized edge, pulling off high-stakes heists and pushing drugs. Raised by his grandmother, Winnie Johnson, whose son Keith was a victim of the Moors murders, Tony grew up in a home shadowed by grief, with a shrine to Keith, whose body was never found. Undeterred, Tony carved out a fearsome reputation. The Cheetham Hill crew admired his boldness, putting him behind the wheel of a top-tier Cosworth as a driver for a gang leader. He was also a key player in their brutal turf war with Moss Side, even emerging as a suspect in the 1988 killing of rival gangster Anthony Scratch Gardner. A daring armed robbery in November 1990 at Mumps Bridge, Oldham, where over £300,000 was stolen, set the stage for White Tony's downfall. Police believed Johnson was involved and had entrusted £70,000 of the loot to Desmond Noonan, a friend from the powerful Noonan crime family. The Noonans, Damien, Desmond, Dominic, and Derek, dominated Manchester's underworld, running armed robberies, drug deals, and nightclub security. Tensions flared when Desmond allegedly shorted Johnson, offering only £40,000 back. Furious, Johnson lashed out with threats against Desmond and his brothers, a reckless move that crossed the line. This dispute, rooted in betrayal and greed, would prove to be a fatal misstep for the brash gangster. In a deadly showdown outside the Penny Black pub in Cheetham, owned by Derek Noonan, Anthony Johnson and his friend Tony McKee met with the Noonan brothers, Desmond, Damien, Dominic, and Derek, alongside their associates, wheelchair-bound Paul Flannery and Michael Sharples. A heated argument erupted, and it's alleged Flannery opened fire, shooting both Johnson and McKee. As Johnson tried to flee, he was caught and executed with shots to the back and head. McKee, though wounded, escaped with his life. Charged with murder, the Noonans faced McKee as the key witness, who claimed he only testified after receiving death threats against him and his partner. The Noonans and their allies insisted they were friends with Johnson and had no motive to kill him, arguing McKee's testimony stemmed from a deal with the real culprits. Defended by top QC Michael Mansfield, and despite death threats targeting Mary Monson's legal team representing the Noonans, the jury delivered a stunning not guilty verdict, clearing all the accused. Unaware of the full extent of the Gangland fallout, the Hacienda's owners, led by Tony Wilson, were optimistic about curbing the club's violence when it reopened in 1991. To tackle the gang threats, they hired Top Guard Security, a heavyweight London firm that promised the muscle and expertise to keep Manchester's underworld in check. The plan was to house 3 lead doormen in a secure Manchester flat and bus in a 50-strong door team from London each weekend to minimise local ties and reduce the risk of intimidation. With White Tony Johnson, their main gangland troublemaker, dead in an underworld feud, the Hacienda's management made a bold but naive move. They invited gang leaders to the club for free, hoping to pacify them and prevent their crews from targeting the new security team. Little did they know, this move would entangle the powerful Noonan family deeper into the club's violent, money-soaked future. To curb the gang violence plaguing the Hacienda, the club rolled out a beefed-up security plan for its 1991 reopening. The Moss Side gangs, mostly tied to the club's occasional jungle nights, weren't the main issue, but the Cheetham Hill gang remained a constant threat. A new membership scheme, complete with metal detectors, was introduced to screen out troublemakers. The police declined to assist with door security, but demanded strict measures to satisfy both themselves and the city council. On the highly anticipated reopening night, massive crowds lined up around the block to join the membership program. Burly bouncers, decked out in paramilitary-style uniforms and backed by snarling Alsatian dogs, manned the entrances as ravers passed through weapon-scanning detectors. Ryan Day, a partygoer present that night, described the vibe as electric yet tense. He'd seen fights break out before, dealers getting smashed with champagne bottles by rival crews, but the Hacienda's hedonistic music and ecstasy-fuelled rave scene kept it irresistible. While queuing, Ryan witnessed a group of 40 sharply dressed lads, later identified as the Cheetham Hill gang, storm the front entrance, overpowering the outmatched doorman. A Daily Mirror report later detailed the chaos. A drug gang gate crashed the grand reopening of Britain's trendiest club. Despite tough security, 30 thugs barged past bouncers at Manchester's Hacienda night spot, closed 3 months ago after violence between warring gangs. It took 60 police officers and a riot van to eject the Cheetham Hill mob after they ignored management's pleas to leave. Despite the revamped security, the Cheetham Hill gang's disruption on opening night proved the old problems hadn't gone away, but a new threat was emerging from Salford, a rising gang from the Ordsall estate looking to seize control of the Hacienda's lucrative scene. Tony Wilson noted, "The Salford crew became our real problem, coming from Ordsall Road to take over as the dominant force. The Moss Side gangs, like Gooch and Pepperhill, only showed up for jungle nights every 6 months or so." Wilson vividly described the Salford gang's rise, like a phoenix, a great big effing bird rising from the flames of rubbish burning on the Ordsall estate with wild staring eyes and a beak that'd peck your head off if you dared look back. Paul Massey, a Salford gang leader fresh out of prison, saw the Hacienda as a gold mine. He and his crew had previously controlled the upstairs of another Manchester club, Conspiracy, until it shut down in 1990 after a student was stabbed. The Salford lads, a tough bunch drawn from the city's working-class estates, were hungry for power. The old Equality Street gang, who once ran Manchester's pubs and clubs, had no interest in the rave scene, now wealthy and established as businessmen. They'd already clashed with Salford's crew, leaving several of their men battered, and were content to steer clear of the ecstasy-driven nightlife. Massey, sensing opportunity, rallied his crew to challenge the Hacienda's new London-based security team from Top Guard. Tensions had already flared between the London doormen and Salford locals, with Massey viewing their actions as disrespect. He mobilized his gang, who roared up to the club in cars, tires screeching, and confronted the doormen. Massey stormed the entrance, declaring that he and his Salford crew ran Manchester's clubs, not the outsiders. His ultimatum was clear: let Salford lads in for free or face serious trouble. Trouble brewed quickly after a Top Guard doorman ejected the boyfriend of a Salford gang member's daughter for dealing drugs. This gave Paul Massey the pretext he needed. One night soon after, the Salford crew descended on the Hacienda in force, heavily armed and ready for war. The doorman, sensing danger, had locked the main entrance, but a staff member inside opened a side door. The Salford lads poured in like a pack of ravenous hyenas, launching a brutal attack, stabbing, slashing, and glassing the bouncers in a chaotic frenzy. The London-based doormen, far from home, were outmatched and overwhelmed. One local bouncer was stabbed 4 times in the thigh and glassed, while another narrowly survived a Rambo knife attack, saved only by a rib bone. Some bouncers fled, and terrified clubbers abandoned the dance floor as the remaining security team was cornered at the main bar and viciously beaten. Police swarmed the scene, locking down the club, with a helicopter overhead, casting spotlights to catch any fleeing gang members. The attack left 6 bouncers hospitalized with stab wounds, making grim headlines and exposing the Hacienda's ongoing gang problem. The Hacienda's owners, realizing their security plan had failed, saw no choice but to negotiate with the enemy. They struck a deal with a Salford-based security firm, placing Damien Noonan, recently acquitted of murder and a close ally of Paul Massey, as head doorman. With Massey's crew now embedded, the Salford gang took over the Hacienda, turning it into their lucrative stronghold and tightening their grip on the club's operations. From 1991 until its closure in June 1997, Paul Massey and the Salford crew raked in thousands, ruling the Hacienda with an iron grip. Backed by the Noonan brothers and tough enforcers like former armed robber Jason Coughlin, their security team was a formidable force. But the club's glory days couldn't last. By 1997, the Hacienda shut its doors for good. Over the next 2 decades, key figures like Paul Massey, Desmond Noonan, and Damien Noonan met violent ends, marking the decline of Manchester's underworld titans. Meanwhile, Tony Wilson, the club's visionary founder, died of natural causes, leaving behind a legendary legacy forever etched in music and cultural history. The Hacienda's violent saga left deep scars on Manchester's club scene, forcing a reckoning for nightlife venues across the city. The brutal gang clashes, especially the Salford crew's takeover, pushed club owners to tighten security. ID checks, CCTV cameras, and stricter door policies became the norm as venues fought to keep the rave spirit alive without descending into chaos. The Hacienda's troubles were a wake-up call. Freedom came at a cost, and clubs had to adapt to survive the gangland threat. In Manchester's underworld, the Salford gang's grip on the Hacienda marked a power shift. With Paul Massey and the Noonans calling the shots, they solidified their dominance, sidelining rivals like the Cheetham Hill gang. Moss Side crews like Gooch and Pepperhill stuck to their turf, only surfacing for jungle nights, but Salford's rise reshaped the city's criminal hierarchy. The Hacienda became a symbol of their muscle, a cash cow they milked until its 1997 closure. Despite the bloodshed, the Hacienda's cultural legacy burned bright. It was ground zero for the rave revolution, launching Manchester's music scene onto the global stage with bands like New Order and DJs spinning house and techno. Yet, its darker side, dealers, stabbings, and gang wars, tarnished its mythos. Tony Wilson's vision of a boundary-pushing venue endured, inspiring future generations of club owners and ravers. His dream outlived the violence, cementing the Hacienda as a chaotic but iconic chapter in music history, forever etched in Manchester's soul. The Hacienda's wild ride of raves, gangs, and bloodshed is just one chapter in the UK's dark criminal history. Want more stories of notorious kingpins, brutal turf wars, and the clubs that shaped a generation? Subscribe to Crime Pulse and become part of our crew digging into the shadows of Britain's underworld. Hit that like button, share this tale with your mates, and drop a comment. Tell us which gangland saga you want us to uncover next. Turn on notifications so you never miss a pulse-pounding story. Let's keep peeling back the layers of the UK's darkest corners together.